Racism at 30,000 feet, a mistake she'll never forget. Woman insults Michael Jordan unaware of his power. His move? Jordan bought the entire plane. In the end, her tears told the story of regret. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching us from. We'll keep going. Victoria Pierce stood at Gate B-17 of Chicago O'Hare International Airport, her Louboutin heels clicking impatiently against the polished floor as she watched the rain streak down the massive windows. Her perfectly tailored Armani suit and meticulously styled blonde hair stood in stark contrast to the casual attire of other passengers, waiting to board the flight to Atlanta. The weather delay was eating into her carefully planned schedule, and she could feel her blood pressure rising with each passing minute. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now begin boarding our first-class passengers for Flight AA2478 to Atlanta, the gate agent announced, her voice barely audible over the airport's constant buzz. Victoria straightened her designer blazer and strode forward, her Louis Vuitton carry-on rolling smoothly behind her. At 35, she was the youngest senior vice president at Marshall & Reed Consulting, and tomorrow's conference would be her chance to cement her position for the firm's upcoming executive reorganization. Everything had to be perfect. As she settled into her first-class seat, Victoria immediately pulled out her tablet to review her presentation one last time. The upcoming leadership conference wasn't just another corporate event. It was her gateway to the C-suite. She had spent months preparing, analyzing every possible angle, and ensuring that her strategy would outshine her competitors, particularly James Anderson, her main rival for the promotion. The soft thud of a bag being stored in the overhead compartment drew her attention. A tall man in a casual grey sweatsuit was taking the seat next to her. Victoria's lips tightened into a thin line as she observed his attire. First class had standards, or at least it used to. She shifted slightly away, making her disapproval evident. The man settled into his seat with the fluid grace of an athlete, offering her a warm smile that she barely acknowledged. Victoria returned to her tablet, but couldn't help stealing glances at her seatmate. Despite his casual clothing, there was something commanding about his presence, something familiar that she couldn't quite place. "First time heading to Atlanta?" His deep voice broke through her thoughts. Victoria looked up, her response dripping with condescension. "No, I'm a frequent flyer. I have important business there." She emphasized the word important, making it clear she wasn't interested in casual conversation with someone who clearly didn't belong in first class. "Business can be important," he agreed with an amused smile, "but sometimes the most valuable experiences come from unexpected places." There was something about his tone that irritated her, a calm self-assurance that seemed to dismiss her carefully constructed world of corporate hierarchy and status symbols. Before she could formulate a suitably cutting response, a flight attendant approached their row, her eyes widening in recognition. "Mr. Jordan, it's such an honor to have you on board today. Can I get you anything before takeoff?" Victoria felt her face flush as realization dawned. Michael Jordan, the basketball legend, was sitting next to her, and she had just treated him like an unwelcome intruder. But rather than backing down, her embarrassment crystallized into defensive anger. "I suppose being a celebrity means you don't have to follow the usual dress code," she said with a sharp smile, trying to maintain her superiority despite her obvious faux pas. Michael turned to her with an expression of genuine interest rather than offense. "You know, I've found that real success isn't about what you wear or how important you appear to others. It's about the impact you make and the lives you touch. But that's something each person has to discover for themselves." The words hit Victoria like a splash of cold water, but she refused to let them penetrate her carefully constructed armor. She turned back to her tablet, trying to focus on her presentation. Yet, as the plane took off into the rain-heavy Chicago sky, she found herself increasingly distracted by his words and the quiet confidence with which he had delivered them. Throughout the flight, Victoria couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting in her carefully ordered world. She kept remembering the way other passengers looked at Michael, not with the fearful respect she commanded in her corporate realm, but with genuine warmth and admiration. It was unsettling, like a crack appearing in a foundation she had always believed to be unshakable. As the plane began its descent into Atlanta, Victoria found herself stealing one last glance at her seatmate. Michael was reading a document titled Atlanta Youth Center Initiative, his face intent and focused. For a brief moment, she wondered what it would be like to care about something beyond the next promotion or the next status symbol. Then she quickly pushed the thought away. She had a conference to dominate and a career ladder to climb. There was no time for such distracting thoughts. The Ritz-Carlton Atlanta's conference center buzzed with energy as executives from across the country gathered for the annual leadership summit. Victoria moved through the crowd with practiced ease, exchanging perfectly calibrated smiles and handshakes. Her interaction with Michael Jordan on the flight still nagged at her, but she pushed it aside. Today was about proving her worth. As she prepared to take the stage for her presentation on maximizing corporate efficiency through strategic restructuring, Victoria caught sight of James Anderson in the front row, wearing his trademark smirk. Something about his expression made her uneasy, but she dismissed it as simple pre-presentation jitters. The presentation started perfectly. Victoria commanded the room with her usual authority, laying out her vision for streamlining operations through aggressive cost-cutting measures. The audience seemed impressed, nodding along with her points about efficiency and profit maximization. Then came the Q&A session. James stood up, his expression concerned, but his eyes gleaming with barely concealed triumph. Ms. Pierce, your strategy is impressive from a purely numbers perspective, but aren't you worried about the human cost? Our sources indicate that your previous restructuring projects have led to significant employee dissatisfaction and decreased long-term productivity. How do you respond to accusations that you lack the emotional intelligence and collaborative spirit necessary for modern leadership? The room fell silent. Victoria felt the blood drain from her face as whispers began to circulate. She recognized the trap too late. James had been gathering ammunition, collecting testimonials from employees affected by her previous projects. Her reputation for ruthless efficiency was being turned against her. Through sheer force of will, Victoria maintained her composure and finished the session, but she knew the damage was done. As the crowd dispersed, she overheard fragments of conversations are cold, out of touch, old-school management style. Everything she had worked for was unraveling. Back in her hotel room, Victoria paced frantically, her perfectly constructed world crumbling around her. The television droned in the background until a familiar voice caught her attention. It was Michael Jordan speaking about his community center project in Atlanta. Success isn't just about personal achievement, he was saying. It's about lifting others up along the way. Our center isn't just about basketball. It's about showing these kids that someone believes in them, that they have value beyond what society might tell them. The camera panned to show teenagers working with mentors, their faces bright with hope and determination. Victoria found herself drawn to the screen, watching as Michael interacted with the young people, his genuine warmth so different from her carefully calculated professional demeanor. One young man in particular caught her attention. He was tall and lanky, with an intense focus as he practiced shooting baskets. The reporter mentioned his name was Marcus Thompson, a promising player from a challenging background who had found direction through the center's programs. As Victoria watched, she remembered Michael's words on the plane about impact and touching lives. She thought about James's accusations of lacking emotional intelligence and collaboration skills. For the first time in her career, she wondered if she had been climbing the wrong ladder all along. Without fully understanding why, Victoria found herself opening her laptop and searching for more information about the community center. It was located just a few miles from her hotel, and they were always looking for volunteers and supporters. Her finger hovered over the contact form as doubt crept in. What did she know about community service? What could she possibly offer? Then she remembered the look on Marcus's face as he practiced, that pure determination she recognized from her own early days, before status and power became her driving forces. Before she could talk herself out of it, she filled out the form scheduling a visit for the following afternoon. As Victoria finally lay down to sleep that night, Her carefully organized world felt off balance. The presentation's catastrophe should have been consuming her thoughts, but instead, she found herself thinking about the teenagers at the community center, about Marcus's focused expression, and about Michael Jordan's words on the plane. Tomorrow would be different, she decided. Tomorrow she would step out of her comfort zone and into unknown territory. Victoria's designer heels clicked uncertainly on the community center's polished basketball court as she made her way inside. The familiar scent of ambition hung in the air, but it was different here. Raw, hopeful, untainted by corporate politics. Teenagers practiced their shots while others huddled over homework in the study area. The energy was infectious, yet she felt oddly out of place in her Chanel suit. "Ms. Pierce," a staff member approached with a clipboard. "Mr. Jordan mentioned you might be stopping by. He's running a mentoring session right now, but he'll be with you shortly." Victoria's surprise must have shown on her face because the staff member smiled. "He always remembers everyone he meets, that's just who he is." Before Victoria could respond, a basketball rolled to her feet. As she bent to pick it up, a teenage girl approached, her expression guarded. "You're not from around here, are you?" The question carried an edge sharp enough to cut through Victoria's corporate armor. No, I'm not," Victoria admitted, handling the basketball with unpracticed hands. "Then why are you here? Looking for some feel-good story to tell at your next charity gala?" The girl's words struck uncomfortably close to Victoria's initial motivations. "Jasmine," Michael Jordan's voice carried across the court as he approached. "Remember what we talked about? Everyone deserves a chance to prove themselves." Jasmine grabbed the basketball from Victoria's hands and jogged back to her friends, leaving Victoria feeling more unsettled than any boardroom confrontation ever had. "She's got a good heart," Michael said, "but life hasn't given her many reasons to trust people in suits." He gestured for Victoria to follow him to the sidelines. "What brought you here, really?" Victoria watched Marcus, the young man she'd seen on TV, practicing three-pointers with intense concentration. "I thought I knew what success looked like," she said slowly. "Corner office, executive title, power suits. But yesterday something went wrong. Everything I'd built started to crumble, and I realized maybe I've been measuring success with the wrong metrics." Michael studied her for a moment. "Marcus over there, he reminds me of myself at that age. Raw talent, fierce determination. But he's thinking about quitting." "Quitting? Why?" Victoria's attention snapped to the teenager, her business instincts kicking in. "His family's struggling. He feels responsible for helping out, thinks basketball is a selfish dream." Michael paused. "Sometimes talent isn't enough. Sometimes people need someone to believe in them, to show them a path forward." Victoria watched as Marcus missed a shot, frustration evident in his stance. Without thinking, she stepped forward. Would it be okay if I talked to him?" Michael's smile was knowing. "That's why you're here, isn't it?" Over the next hour, Victoria found herself sitting with Marcus in the center's study area, her corporate presentation forgotten as she helped him map out a practical plan. Her business acumen, usually focused on profit margins, shifted to budgeting for groceries and finding scholarship opportunities. "I didn't think people like you cared about people like us," Marcus said quietly as they finished outlining his weekly schedule. Victoria felt something crack inside her chest. "I'm learning that I didn't know as much as I thought I did about a lot of things." Days turned into weeks, and Victoria found herself spending every free moment at the center. Her corporate wardrobe gradually gave way to more practical attire, and she discovered that respect earned through genuine connection felt different from fear-based deference. But then came the day Marcus didn't show up for practice. Victoria found him sitting alone on the center's back steps, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "My mom lost her job," he said before she could ask. "I can't do this anymore. Dreams are for people who can afford them." Victoria felt her old self surface. Not the cold corporate calculator, but the determined fighter who had clawed her way up from middle management. "That's not true," she said firmly. "Dreams are for people willing to work for them, and you've already proved that's you." She pulled out her tablet, the same one she'd been clutching on that first-class flight, that now felt like a lifetime ago. Let's figure this out. Together. The news hit like a thunderbolt during a routine board meeting at the community center. Funding cuts threatened to close the facility within 6 months. Victoria watched the color drain from Marcus's face as he overheard the discussion from the study area. She knew that look. It was the same one she'd worn when James Anderson had ambushed her. Presentation weeks ago. "You've been here almost every day for weeks," Michael said, catching her after the meeting. "Are you still just trying to feel better about yourself, or are you ready to make a real difference?" The challenge in his voice reminded her of their first encounter on the plane, but this time Victoria didn't feel defensive. Instead, she felt energized. "What do you need?" "Not what I need," Michael corrected. "What they need." He gestured to the teenagers scattered throughout the center. Victoria spent that night at her desk, her corporate skills turning to a new purpose. By morning, she had a plan. Her networking abilities, once used exclusively for career advancement, now focused on connecting with potential donors. Her presentation skills, previously reserved for impressing shareholders, transformed into passionate appeals for community support. She reached out to her corporate contacts, but not with the calculated manipulation of before. Instead, she shared stories. Marcus's determination, Jasmine's growing trust, the countless small transformations she witnessed daily. Her genuine passion proved contagious. The fundraising gala she organized bore little resemblance to the sterile corporate events of her past. The community center's basketball court transformed into an elegant venue, but the real centerpiece was the teenagers themselves, confidently sharing their stories with Atlanta's elite. Victoria stood at the podium, facing a room full of potential donors, but her focus remained on the young faces scattered throughout the crowd. "A few months ago, I sat in first class, judging a man in a sweatsuit," she began, drawing surprised laughter from the audience. "I had everything figured out, or so I thought. Success was a simple equation. Power plus status equals worth." She paused, finding Michael in the crowd. He nodded encouragingly. "But true success isn't an equation at all. It's Marcus staying in school while helping his family make ends meet. It's Jasmine learning to trust again. It's watching these amazing young people realize their potential, not because someone handed them anything, but because someone believed they deserved the chance to try." The pledges began rolling in, surpassing their goals. Victoria felt a tap on her shoulder and turned to find James Anderson, her old corporate rival. "I was wrong about you," he said quietly. "This is real leadership." But Victoria barely heard him. She was watching Marcus approach the podium, his confidence now matching his height as he faced the crowd. "Ms. Pierce told me dreams are for people willing to work for them," he said. "But she forgot to mention that sometimes dreams change you while you're chasing them. Sometimes they make you better than you ever thought you could be." Tears threatened to ruin Victoria's makeup as she listened to Marcus describe his journey. She felt a presence beside her and turned to find Michael Jordan, still imposing in his custom suit, but now a friend rather than an intimidating stranger. "Still think first class has a dress code?" he teased. Victoria laughed, remembering her earlier snobbery. "I think I needed that wake-up call on the plane, although," she added with a grin, "you could have mentioned who you were." Would it have mattered? Back then? Probably. But now? She watched as Marcus received a standing ovation, Jasmine cheering loudest of all. "Now I know that true first class has nothing to do with what you're wearing or where you're sitting. It's about who you help along the way." The community center not only survived but thrived. Victoria's corporate experience, combined with her newfound empathy, proved invaluable in establishing sustainable funding sources. But more importantly, she discovered that success could be measured in smiles, in gradual transformations, in moments of breakthrough and growth. 1 year after that rainy morning at O'Hare, Victoria found herself again in first class, this time heading to a different kind of conference, one focused on community development and youth empowerment. As she settled into her seat, a young woman in casual clothes sat next to her. Victoria smiled warmly. First time heading to Atlanta. Benfegshi, transformation had come full circle.